Welcome to the Intelligence Amplifiers, podcast that celebrates the people who make the intelligence a collective superpower. In every episode, we uncover the stories of learning and development leaders who amplify knowledge, break down silos, and empower teams to thrive. These are the enablers of insight, the ones turning expertise into action and shaping the future of work by ensuring that the right knowledge reaches the right people at the right time. So, if you're ready to explore how the intelligence is amplified and shared across organizations, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Well, welcome to today's episode. And today we have Andrew Barrett with us. Hello, Andrew.
Hey, Marko, good to see you. It's good. It's good. Yeah. Thanks for the invitation. I'm excited to chat.
Awesome. Yeah. So you and I met many years ago, and you were at Shopify at the time. And I think we called your manager at the time. We were like, hey, what are you guys doing for developer education? And she said, well, talk to Andrew. He runs our technology stack. And that's kind of how we connected, if I recall properly.
Yeah, exactly. And we were trying to figure out, we had like Shopify was growing like gangbusters. That was kind of during that, like going from a pretty small, just kind of Ottawa-based company to really just like 10xing and looking for like scalable learning solutions, particularly around like connecting people live and just like taking it a lot of the admin parts out of it. And so we were looking for a solution, and that's kind of how we started like really exploring like both the tools that you guys offer, and then just like unpacking some of the functionality that you were to build later. So that was cool.
Yeah, I mean, what kind of struck me that was super interesting to me is I was looking for companies that have a really strong culture. Right, there was this sense of like there's a culture of learning. It's not just like it's on one hand it could be learning is either around compliance, or on the other hand it could be like, oh, we care about learning, we just give everyone an account to their favorite third-party content library. But at Shopify, and a handful of other companies, like I would probably put Netflix and Airbnb and into that kind of camp. Learning it felt like a first-class citizen, right? Like it like you cared about that. You had a vision of what you want to create. You invested in it. So you walked the talk. How did that come about?
Yeah, like it was kind of neat because I had come. It wasn't that long before, like I was in higher ed, and I wasn't in corporate learning. And then I came over to Shopify, and like Shopify, like you said, had this like super strong culture, really cared about learning. They started this cool program. It was dev degree, like, but it was also, they had this kind of contrarian view of learning too, like, and where it wasn't just going to be corporate learning and development, and it wasn't going to be focused about compliance. It was like almost like more kind of pure learning. Like if you're not actually learning things, you're not getting better at something. They didn't want to bother with it. And so it was, okay, well, how do we accomplish like actual learning that's going to have an impact on people's jobs? And like they had this idea of own your own development. And so like the culture was already there. And at Shopify, like from the top down, like Toby, I don't know, I know him, like I met him once, but like super into learning, still seems to be like all about ongoing, like really living, like you said, like living what lifelong learning is all about, and just being adaptable in books. But it was a lot closer to even things that I had like learned about it in my like learning about learning, and they were doing a lot of the things right, whereas like oftentimes that's not the case in corporate learning, where it's focused on something very different than like people actually getting better at something. And so that was like, it was pretty special to have that at Shopify. And they kind of maintained that even as they were scaling, and they were just like looking, almost in a way looking for the tools that they were using to catch up with the reality of what good learning looks like, and like how to do that in a way where people are like part of it too, which was like any sort of really impactful learning. You almost can't do it without having other people involved. And so yeah, so it's just kind of a special place that it was neat to like join and then be part of that and try and help it like continue as the company scaled to from like 1,000 to 10,000 people, and they're bigger now. So yeah,
Yeah, I got to also cross paths with Toby. I think we had a little outage at one point, and he got really involved in that. And I was like, wow, the CEO really cares,
yeah.
and that really struck me as interesting. And yeah, uh,
Yeah. So were you talking with him? That might be
I
an
think
interesting.
I know he complained about something, and I
Yeah,
emailed him and I apologized, and so that was basically my the extent
yeah,
of my interaction with him. But the
yeah,
point was how much he cared about all the learning that you're
yeah,
doing. Yeah, and I remember like you did some. So you mentioned peer learning. So
yeah,
that was one thing that was somewhat unique in the industry. Not a lot of companies do that. So, but there was a very strong culture of peer learning. So letting
yeah,
1,000 flowers bloom. That was one. I also remember there were a lot of like you tried this learning conferences, right? Like there were
yeah.
dedicated time and place for like R&D summit and things like that. Can you maybe talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that was really special too. And like my team supported the tech education teams that were doing it, and so like working with a lot of like this whole team that was putting this together. And so the whole idea of it was like, let's take the time, set it aside, and rather than like, okay, every now and again somebody's gonna like come up and talk about something that they like, some, I don't know, new programming language, or like how to, I don't know, do something in Kubernetes or something like. So instead of having like that just kind of one-off thing, it was okay. We're going to dedicate a chunk of time. Everybody's going to like ha have the time both to present if you're presenting, and you'd submit, and it was like a conference that you go to outside of a company, and people would kind of put the proposals together, and there was a range of different topics, and then everybody from the company went somewhere like, and it was focused on R&D, which included like the software developers, so the engineers, the design folks, like user experience folks, data scientists, product managers. So it was like that group of people, and they all had their own tracks and everything, and then you'd have leaders from the company that would go and present, and then the location of uh, it was in Toronto, and so it was all these venues across Toronto, and some of them were big, some of them were like in the back of a restaurant, and like, so it was an amazing logistical thing, and it was you really got to connect with people because like you were physically sharing this space, and this is all before the pandemic, so we didn't even like, but it was still special just getting out of the work, your day-to-day work, really focusing in on learning and sitting, being able to sit down. There would be a talk, they'd present things, you knew who was going because you had registered with the plus plus tool at Shopify. It was called Session, and and uh, and then you could have this ongoing conversation. So a lot of the challenge of running something like that was just like, how do you even put it up there? How do you like enable people to search for things that are going to resonate with what they need at the time? And then like logistically, how do you how do you help people know where it is? How do you like, sometimes maybe there's materials you wanted to share, so it's not just kind of a one and done thing. And so it was like, it was a big undertaking, and we bumped into some challenges. I think that was the context, like because you had like thousands of engineers. It was like a flash sale, like trying to register for things all at once, because like they were physical venues that you could, maybe only 20 people could go to a certain talk, and that just overwhelmed the system because it was such a unique use case. But a use case that's very similar to like Shopify was like building infrastructure to deal with that exact type of thing, where they'd have some famous person dropping a pair of sneakers doing a flash sale, and like being able to have the infrastructure that could like meet that demand. So it was cool. And then like you're dealing with all these people who are building a product, and they're all very opinionated about the experience of that product, and so like it wasn't without its bumps, but we took some risks, like skinned our knees a few times, but then in the end it was like a really great experience, and it was really cool to kind of work that through that with you, and like and see your team step up and like solve problems on the fly too, which was really you built a lot of strong relationships by going through that adversity. So, yeah,
Yeah, that's right. Now I remember that
yeah,
that's what happened. You basically had thousands of registrations, not in one day, but like within
no,
1 hour or something.
yeah,
And,
yeah,
and it's like what a normal company of your size would do that in a year. We basically had that compressed in 1 hour, and so it's
yeah,
like a total like Lady Gaga effect moment, right? Like
yeah,
or Taylor Swift, whoever, right? Like
yeah,
it was totally yeah, it was good learnings for sure. So
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. But it also showed like people wanted to, like they were committed to going. Like they had the time because they knew they were gonna be in Toronto, like they were
Mm-hmm.
gonna do it, and so they wanted to make sure they went to the sessions that they were interested in. So like people were definitely engaged, almost like more so than the system could handle, which at that time. But it was really, yeah, it was cool. It was
Got it.
like not a cheap undertaking, but it like really showed a commitment to it, and then highlighting those people that are um, like kind of leading the charge from a learning and development perspective within the disciplines. These weren't L&D people that were presenting. It was like people in the disciplines that were presenting, which was really important, I think. So
Yeah, and you mentioned how Shopify has very decentralized learning teams, right? Like there was R&D team, there was L&D team, like leading at Shopify, etc.
yeah,
There were all these different teams, and yet you wanted to kind of standardize them on a single stack, right? Like that's your team was supporting multiple teams. How did that work out? Like what were some of the learnings there or challenges?
yeah, yeah. Well, and that was, I think it was part of just growing so fast, where like it was a very entrepreneurial organization, and like they'd have to take big swings at stuff where they're like, okay, we're hiring ton of engineers, so like we need to create a learning tech team, or we have this new platform. It was like Shopify Plus. They had their own learning, like so there were all these different learning teams that were just kind of bubbling up within the different parts of the org, and it was to meet a need. It wasn't because there was some like CLO who was deciding like, okay, there's a gap here, and so we need to fill that gap. It was almost like the demand was there, and that was forcing the creation of these learning and development teams embedded within non-learning teams. And so our team was like, it was the learning technology team. Our goal was to like understand the needs of all these different teams, and then oftentimes they had brought in their own technologies to like meet the needs, and without like they were trying to solve a problem for themselves. And the challenge was like if you have five learning teams and you have five different learning technology stacks, then like it gets pretty unwieldy pretty quickly. And so the goal was like, how do we keep all the benefits of like this decentralized, very nimble approach to things, but also like bring in a system where you're not adding more complexity than you need, and like even just from a cost perspective, like you're not duplicating all this stuff. And so that was the goal of our team, is to try and like find the common pieces. Maybe not everybody's going to get 100% of what they want, but like how do we focus in on what are the right sets of learning tech that are going to meet the needs. And it was a tricky to navigate. Like it's a challenging problem because like the needs change. It's hard to keep up with the teams. They're going to make some teams will be happy and others will be less happy, and so navigating that is not straightforward. Yeah.
Got it. So it's basically for employee 10,000 plus employees, you would provide a single point of entry, like here's all the learning at Shopify. Yet behind the scenes, you would totally give autonomy to various teams to provide their own learning, and let a thousand flowers bloom, but have it all in a sort of discoverable place and easy to
Yeah.
navigate, sort of thing.
And you'd have to make some decisions where you'd see like, okay, no, in terms of admin access or like these
Hmm.
sorts of things, we're going to limit that because whether it's privacy or whether it's just you don't want to make changes that then like somebody changes the logo and it changes everything site wide, or so you'd have to like balance it. And but I think among the folks that I've bumped into, it was pretty wide open. Like we had various types of learning tech in there, and we were pretty open with allowing people to author content in the systems or host a session or these sorts of things. but which then brings other problems because like then the maintenance of it, like you have people who author something that gets widely used and then they're in a different job, and so who's maintaining it? So there's these trade-offs, and so I think sometimes we were more open on just like, okay, cool, yeah, you have a need, go try it, like we'll give you keys to get in and do what you want to do. But and the cost of that was like maybe that becomes like it's hard to sustain that over time or sustain that program or that material over time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, and that peer learning, that ability to democratize learning, where everyone can contribute. I think that was the part of the magic at Shopify. And at the same time, I find that a lot of sort of traditional L&D professionals totally get scared when you like say, hey, like anyone can put anything. Well, what do you mean?
Yeah.
Like then it's going to be a total mess. So there's this conflict between sort of the old and the new, or top down, like wanting to sort of disseminate like certain things, and bottoms up, letting sort of the knowledge just be shared. And so it sounds like you kind of strike that balance well at Shopify. But like any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I think it is there's a general I think fear of just letting a thousand flowers bloom, or having that decentralized approach. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that makes sense in some environments where like if it's compliance training, or if it's or like you're in a highly regulatory environment, like you need to maybe lock certain things down.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the reality is if you don't kind of allow kind of that, like people want to learn, they want to share it, and if you don't provide them ways of doing that within the organization, they're going to find ways of doing it outside the organization, and then you lose visibility into actually what's going on, because like people could be doing things totally independent of your learning systems, and then you don't have any data about it, and they could be learning something, I don't know. So like let's say there's some technical standard or something like that, and they're off taking some a course from a content provider, and maybe they're learning something that would go against the standards within the organization. So it's actually taking them further away from what they should know than if they had kind of navigated it through the organization. But you have no idea. And then the other piece is you'd bump into these situations where like the company's spending a ton of money on all these, people are just expensing a bunch of learning experiences, but then so you're losing out on, like, you could probably get a better bang for the buck if you brought it all together, but then you could have one engineer like learning some topic, and then like there's another engineer like two desks down, they could be learning the exact same topic but they don't know about it, and so you kind of lose these opportunities for them to like come together and like learn from each other. And so this peer learning can just kind of disappear, or maybe it happens but then it's excluding some folks. And that's one of the things like at Technicon I think has been brought up, like if it's not just about the learning, it's also about like connecting people, and then bringing things into like making them visible in a way that this like more authentic kind of distributed learning, it's still happening but it's not kind of under it's not hidden, so like more people can benefit from it, because sometimes the people who benefit the most from those kind of informal networks are like, they look a lot more like me than maybe and that's an equity issue, and then you're missing out on like empowering your best talent. And so yeah, it's complicated, and like every organization I think is a little bit different on it, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, it's like you said, it's about finding that balance, and I thought you did some really awesome work striking the right, what felt like the right balance. So
Yeah,
um,
thanks, Marko. Yeah.
yeah, one thing you mentioned earlier, you mentioned dev degree, and I wanted to kind of chat briefly about that, because I also thought that was something that was very unique. I haven't seen that anywhere in the industry done like that,
Yeah.
and it takes us from like how do we focus on internal people, but to how do we focus on externally, but it was very strategic as well. Do you want to share a little bit about dev degree and how that came about?
Yeah, it was a really cool program, and it's still out there. And it was my first. It was actually the reason I came over to Shopify, because I was at Carleton University in a L&D role there, and it really the problem was like you'd have these people that would go through a 4-year computer science degree program, and then they graduate, and then they go to work at a company like Shopify. But this was not just Shopify. Like a common problem was they get there and they wouldn't know how to take what they learned in computer science and be able to apply it in like an authentic context of Shopify, where they're, like you say, they're selling, I don't know, some Lady Gaga thing, and there's a flash sale, and it's not like a toy database that they're working on. It's an actual database. And so um, and having worked in higher ed, and like definitely has an important role to play, and theory is important and all these things, but um, and then seeing what happens in corporate learning, like there was this gap there, and the dev degree program is really focused on like how do we help someone go through a program. So this was a computer science degree program, and the initial
Hmm.
partnership was with Carleton, between Shopify and Carleton University. So they had a group of students that went through a computer science program while working at Shopify the entire time. And so the idea was like, okay, if you're taking a databases course, wouldn't it be great if you could also be working on like actual databases with like in an authentic work environment? So it's like almost like co-op, but it was like ongoing, and it was trying to like line things up as best as possible so that they're not just learning the theory, but then they're applying what they're learning in their job, like after class. So that was it was it was really cool, and it was a small cohort, but it has scaled a little bit. But it was very high touch and a pretty special commitment from the Shopify leadership, and JML, who's their CTO. He was a like, that was kind of his big thing, and really had that commitment to it for a long time. So yeah.
And speaking of higher ed, you kind of alluded to this at the beginning. You started as a computer science
Yeah.
student, and you ended with a PhD in education. So like, it seems like there's a little bit of a transition. So what happened? How did you end up in education?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, like computer, like I really liked computer science, and it was very interesting. Like it's solving these problems, and trying like thinking through something and creating something that would like continue to be able to solve a problem. Like you have a good function, and it's going to like keep working.
mhm.
So that was I really liked that kind of problem solving logical aspect of it. What I found though was I would keep working on these big projects, and what they were producing, I wasn't as excited about it. So I was in consulting, and I got to travel all over the world, which was really cool. It was long hours, but then I'm like, this is something about this is just not resonating. And so I look back at the things that I really liked, and I had taught swimming, and like through sports, there's an act like learning is such a big part of sports. And so I figured there's something about learning that that resonated with me. And so I was able to get into a program where it was Southern Illinois University was where I did my master's, and then Indiana University for the PhD. And it was all about instructional design and how do you leverage technology to promote learning. And so I really fell in love with that. And it's a wicked problem. It's hard to do it well, and it requires both the technology, but all these other pieces to it too. So it's just almost endlessly fascinating, I find.
And you wrote a book on that, right?
Yeah, like I co-authored a book with my Dr. Ted Frick is my was my thesis advisor, and so I ended up helping out with the book and writing a chapter, and it was all about learning analytics, and then how do you leverage that to both measure and assess learning, but also the learning experiences themselves. So like how do you make them better and better, or like what are the pieces of a learning experience that actually leads to more learning, and that's where the kind of theory and practice really come together. And so but like doing the PhD, I always I would find the problems really interesting, and but then I wasn't as motivated to like publish, and that doesn't lead to a good academic career if you're not willing to like really bear down and publish a lot of stuff. And so I wanted to come back to Ottawa, and was lucky to land a position at Carleton University, and I still do a little bit of writing, but then get into these kind of more hands-on practical things, and leverage both the technology and the education pieces.
Got it.
Yeah.
And then from Carleton, you ended up at that degree, and then Shopify, and we did all this like cool stuff together at Shopify.
Yeah.
But then you went to the bank, right? And so going from like this like leading edge tech company that's got this known for this amazing culture. Well, how was it different, or how was it the same
Yeah.
at the bank?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it was, they had a great team at the bank in
Hmm.
the learning and development area. And so my boss who hired me, like, got to know him while I was at Shopify, and I just saw what they were doing, and it was like different organizations. It gets back to our previous conversation, like different organizations optimize for different things. And so they had
Hmm.
like a very well established centralized learning and development function. They had an established ed tech stack. They had invested in content providers. Like it kind of, it seemed like, okay, yeah, they have it kind of figured out. And Shopify like was, you could do a lot of things quickly. But it didn't feel as strategic, and it was, so I wanted to partially just see what is uh, corporate L&D look like at a established organization, big organization, and just learn what that looks like. And they were very different. Like tolerance for risk was like total opposites. There was the desire to innovate within the bank, but then you bump into things where they're highly regulated, and they have a very different appetite for risk than Shopify does. And so people would want to innovate and like ship some interesting things, but you sometimes hit barriers where you couldn't, say, get approval from a group on something, or you couldn't get the resources to kind of sustain it over time. And so yeah, so it was just very different experience. Yeah.
Got it. And then so okay, so you're at the bank, so you have this like
Yeah.
sort of like change in like culture in which you operate, and then ChatGPT comes along, right? And
Yeah.
so what did you see in that? What was your insight?
Yeah. It seemed like it was going to change a lot of things. Like it was, I remember I was on the way to a vendor conference. It wasn't you guys, but and I was stuck in the airport, and that's when they did the like they did the release, and I was just watching it, and I signed up for it immediately, and like was using it on the terrible Wi-Fi at the airport, and it was just it was shocking. Like it was just shocking, and the some in some ways this kind of, it goes back to like my why I was interested in computer science, because I just, the potential of technology and all that stuff was high, and then for them to put something out there that could do a lot of these things that just, it seemed like we were so far away from uh, having a tool that could do those types of things. I was so excited about it, and I wanted to like dive in and learn a lot about it. So that I knew that I needed to take a different step, and yeah, yeah. But that's
So
that's probably like I'm curious too, because like you had your own moment too where you decided to go out on your own as well, and like what we can dive back into the AI stuff, but I'd love to like, did you have a similar moment where you're like, I gotta do this entrepreneurial thing?
well, so I mean, I've always been an entrepreneur. The only time I really had a job was
Yeah.
Twitter. That was my only
Oh,
sort
okay.
of like grown up job, and that was because they acquired my previous company. So
Ah.
I was kind of
Yeah.
forced. But I went to Twitter because I wanted to learn. I was
Yeah.
like, I remember I said there are three things. One was working on a billion person problems, like, and I
Right.
felt Twitter was doing that at the time. The other one was seeing how an organization at that scale operates. I was always in startups before. A
Yeah.
third one was like just like meeting badasses. Like
Yeah.
I wanted to like surround myself with amazing people, and that's what I found the culture there was. And like there were a couple of things. One of the things that struck me as surprising we were doing Twitter University was how open people were to sharing their knowledge,
Yeah,
especially engineers.
yeah,
And that you mentioned peer learning, so
yeah,
that willingness to just come and share
yeah,
was really amazing. Um, and then we needed a way to kind of manage that, so we ended up, no LMS worked for us, so we built something internal. And
yeah,
then as you mentioned Technocon, as I was comparing notes with my peers, so I was talking to, I think, Jenny at Salesforce and
yeah,
Rajan at LinkedIn, and there were a couple of people from Autodesk and etc. It became apparent that other people would also love
yeah,
a tool like that. So that was kind of the genesis of, like, the light bulb kind of went off. And I'm like, maybe what we built at Twitter is useful beyond just this one company. So that's how I launched Plus Plus. Ultimately, that was my
yeah,
sort of moment of insight. So yeah.
yeah. Well, and just like the role of people, both in terms of like within Twitter and that desire to share, and then like and knowing some of the folks that you mentioned, like I know that's similar at these other places, and there's something about the people element that I don't know. A lot of the corporate L&D it just misses entirely. Like it's almost like they have to have control over the experience and not kind of allow this I don't know the the spark that comes from like people wanting to share. And then like if it's exciting when you meet somebody who wants to share something and you're going to listen to that, so and it's such a different way than just when it's just it could be the same content and it's just like presented to you. But if it's you're hearing it or it's connected to someone that you know is passionate about it, it totally changes the dynamic, which kind of ties back into the AI stuff too, because like that'll be
Mm-hmm.
interesting to see how that all changes when like AI could say the same thing, but that if I'm hearing it from you, I'm going to take that differently than if it's just spit out on ChatGPT or something like that, even though it's the same information. So it'll be very, and this is what I find very cool. And L&D, I think, is right in the middle of it. Is like how do you navigate those things? Like how do you help people get the most out of AI while still the human connection and the human piece of it. I don't think it's going to go away. I think in some cases it's going to be even more important. So like how do you enable those connections and not throw the baby out with the bathwater? So yeah,
Yeah, I had this. So of course AI is affecting all of us, and I would ask a lot of L&D professionals, like, "Hey, what do you think about AI?" And I would go to, like, conferences like
yeah,
DevLearn, for example, and a lot of that seemed like, well, we need to create content, so AI is going to create content for us. And I was like, well, that's like garbage in, garbage out. Like,
yeah,
we're just going to end up with more content, but how do we consume it? What does that actually do? How does that make
yeah,
anybody's life better? And that's what I was like, I don't think this is it, but
no,
there's something that's super interesting. And I was just talking to my team recently, and we were kind of playing on this, like, artificial intelligence, but then also something around collective intelligence or swarm intelligence,
hmm,
where, like, when you look at nature, a single bee or a single ant is relatively dumb, but the collective is amazingly intelligent,
yeah,
right? And so I think that there's something there about human collectives, which is basically what an organization or a company is.
yeah,
And what is that fabric that makes for that collective intelligence, and how is it the same or different than artificial intelligence? Like what's
yeah,
anyway, there's something there that's super interesting to
yeah.
I'd love your thoughts on AI. I know you're passionate about that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I think you're right. I think there's something special about that collective intelligence, and you don't want to lose that because it's through those interactions with people, but then also I think the interactions with AI too, because like even if it's and this was me last night. I was like I watched a movie and then I'm like I have these ideas about it was the Ballad of Buster Scruggs, which is a Coen Brothers movie, and I was trying to make sense of like the different chapters. And then like if I was sitting there with you, we could talk about it and everything, but I was interacting with the AI to like try and like run these ideas that I had about it. And so there's still something about it's almost like the collective intelligence, even just with me and an AI, to try and help me kind of almost reflect on things and work through my ideas. And I think it's like that's a small piece of what you could do, but then in a group setting, and this almost goes back to like the the dev conference that we had at Shopify, where like there's something special about bringing people together and having like, sure, there's there's the presentation that is very visible, and like that's what you're tracking, and you know the name, and people, you have the deck that's up there, but then there's all the interactions that happen around it. That's the special, almost the special, the most special part. And so the more formal structured thing almost enables you to create this special, unpredictable thing that people are really learning and engaging and building relationships. And I think AI can help with that side of it too. It would be terrible if it was just like, okay, now we're just like pumping out a bunch of like self-paced learning, and I don't know, it would be a much poorer learning experience, I think. So yeah,
Hmm.
I think it.
And you have this theory of like how the waves in which we're sort of gonna see AI unfold into learning and development space. Like
Yeah,
how does that play out?
yeah. Well, and I think everybody's trying to figure out like, okay, we have this AI that it's getting better and better at certain things, and there's new models, and like all the different companies have their own versions, and it's like, oh, cool, there's computer use from Anthropic where I can talk with somebody, uh, and it's like, well, this seems like it could be useful in the work I'm doing, but like exactly how to do that, that's kind of like the first wave. I think it's like both L&D professionals or tech enablement professionals, but then also engineers or product managers. Everybody's like trying to figure out how do we address that first wave of just like integrating into our workflows.
Hmm.
Um, and if we can figure that out, and like partially it's our ability to figure out the right places to insert AI and actually have it produce value. Like if we figure that out, then our jobs will change. Like both like the L&D jobs, and also our stakeholders, so engineers or whoever. And so if these jobs change, that's almost like the second wave. It's like, okay, uh, now I don't know, whatever the percentage is. Let's say 20% of my job changes. So like, what am I going to do in the rest of that 20%? Like, probably I'm going to have to learn to do new things. Like, or maybe I'm doing more of the 80%, but now like I'm not there's some pieces of that AI is just taken care of. So there's going to be a demand for learning at that point, where it's like, okay, my job used to be this, now it's going to be this. How do I get from there to here? And people within organizations are going to go to their L&D teams and be like, okay, I need to, whether it's upskilling or reskilling or whatever it is, but I think there's going to be this influx of people who need to get better at certain skills, and it's going to be like, it could be a lot of people. It could overwhelm the capacity of L&D teams, and kind of getting back to our original conversation, a lot of corporate L&D is really not focused on actually helping people get better, like learning new skills. It's more compliance oriented, and that is just not going to help at all in this situation with wave two. Um, and I don't know, I'll stop there, but like then I think there's a wave three as well we can get into, but
What do you think? What's that like? Far fetched future. Like, what does that look like?
well, I don't even know how far-fetched, like it could be like, it's almost like all these AI labs they're trying to make AI that's as good as people in a diverse like range of things, and a lot of them think we're going to get there within even 10 years is kind of a long time horizon. Some folks are talking like 2 or 3 years. So, but even if human level AI is not something that we hit, but even if our jobs just change, and it's okay, let's say it's 20% of our jobs change in some way, and then we got to reskill and all that stuff. But I think it's reasonable to expect that at a kind of if you back up a little bit, like the demand for certain things that either we do or our teams do, demand might change. Because like I've been in L&D and tech for a long time. It used to be like L&D people, I don't know, Marco, if you did this too, but like if you were doing e-learning, you had to like burn it onto like a CD-ROM and like hand it out to people, and like there was like Flash was a big deal, and so like things change. Like the demand for the types of things that we do, like the products and services that we offer, that's probably going to change. So like we can't just assume everything's going to stay the same with AI getting better and better. And then if it does change, then that some things that we're doing, maybe that's going to go obsolete, and or some things that our companies are doing, maybe some things are going to go obsolete. So like that's going to have its own impact on like if I'm in a role and there's just not the demand for what I'm producing, then I'm going to have to like reskill. And is the company going to help me do that, or am I going to have to go to higher ed, or like it'll be interesting to see. And again, the capacity I don't to do that at scale is I don't think it's there. And so, and this is the motivation for like scale learning, because I really think we need to the ability to actually help people learn and then be able to do it at scale, both in organizations and then outside of organizations. And I think we got a lot of work to do, even if like it's not sci-fi change, but it's like just the type of change that we're seeing. If that continues in a linear way, I don't think we're ready for it. And so we got to build that capacity.
Yeah, it's interesting. You kind of got me thinking. If you kind of look at the past and what changed in L&D. So sure, formats change. So as opposed to burning CDs and USB sticks, we moved to online and so forth. But that's just a medium change. That's like you're just kind of moving from one medium to the next. I get that. It's a sort of like it's very predictable. I think what we're saying is going to happen next is it's about reskilling. But reskilling into what, right? So if mundane automatable tasks are now done by AI, then what is the human unique to humans, and how do we focus, play to our strengths, right? Like, and what does that look like? And it's going to be reskilling into something that is soft. I don't know if it's about creativity, learning, ability to adapt, etc. And that's going to require possibly a different way of learning, because it's not going to be like, hey, I'm just going to dump a whole bunch of slides at you and hope you're going to get it. It's going to be something experiential, maybe. I don't know. Any thoughts on that? Or
I really I agree with how you see things, and I think there might still be demand for like say self-paced learning, whether it's a SCORM package or it's a bunch of slides or all that stuff. But like the same way that like every single company doesn't create their own like email server or like email system, they are like you're using Microsoft or Google or whatever. I think it's going to be the same with like self-paced learning, where it's like why have a whole team that's in there creating this stuff unless it's like super specific to the organization. So like that self-paced piece, I think is and highly scalable piece, it's going to be there at some level. I don't think it's going to be within every single. Not every organization will need its own team to do that. But like even in the last, well, and our teams collaborated on like the coaching and peer mentorship learning model, and that's something very new. Not a lot of systems have that ability to like find someone to connect with and meet regularly with to get that mentorship or coaching. And I think that kind of human high touch experience, I think that's less. It'd be really hard to automate that. And I think there's efforts to like provide AI coaching and that sort of thing. But I think people, there's some, and maybe that's going to work for some people, but there's going to be a lot of people where they want to connect with a person and they want to, if they know it's an AI, they're just like, I don't want to, either I don't want to have that deep conversation or open up, or I'm worried about what's happening with the data or all these different, like, I think there's a bunch of barriers where AI might not be able to play there as well. And I think that's an opportunity for L&D folks to like lean into those places where it's like, whether it's coaching or it's like building connections in the organization or really deeply understanding the problems of your stakeholders. And that's something I learned from you, like really like you guys are really good at like just going in and finding people or bumping into a problem and then like really asking questions and really trying to understand that problem deeply, and and then trying to solve that problem. And I think Technocon is very similar, where it's like you're bringing people together and they're sharing the problems that they had and how they've resolved it so that you can learn from them. And I don't think that piece is going to, like, AI might still have a role in there, but like you still need those, the people need to do that work and build the empathy. And I think that there's a lot of opportunity in that kind of touchy feely human space. So Yeah.
hmm Yeah, and you just reminded me. I wanted to another nod to Shopify and Toby specifically, and the Coach's Corner,
Yeah.
which I also thought was something that was super unique. And it
Yeah.
started by Toby had an executive, the CEO had executive coach, had lots of success with that, and then went and democratized that to an entire I think we were like 4,000 employees at the time. You have three times the
Yeah.
size now, but it was about making coaching, professional coaching, available to every Shopify around the world,
Yeah.
right? And we then kind of operationalize that on a platform. But like the genesis was this idea, and like the sheer scale of it and democratization of coaching, which I haven't seen at any company at that scale.
Yeah.
It's usually
Yeah.
just executive teams that get that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've used it myself, and it was really beneficial. And like for them to have the vision of making that possible, like having that commitment, and then being able to work with you guys to actually logistically make that possible. Because like that's a barrier too. Is like just the how do you set all that up? I
Mhm.
don't know if they're still doing that at this time, but it was remarkable their commitment to it. And it's a type of learning experience that like it's super valuable. A lot of people do, but you very rarely do it within your organization. You usually have to do it outside your organization. And so which if L&D folks like, you can learn a lot if you're an L&D organization and you're like you have that as one of the services that you offer, and then you're like, okay, something's going on in this space. Like a lot of people are looking for, I don't know, like a lot of new managers are seeking coaches or something like that. And then that's like a signal, and you can dive into, and you're like, okay, there's something going on that's impacting this group. And maybe there's another type of offering that we can provide that would help kind of bridge that gap. And like it could still be coaching, but it could also be like, I don't know, they're really confused about performance reviews or something like that. And so there's something that could be offered that would help meet that in a more scalable way. But if it's done outside the organization, you just don't have any insight into it at all. So yeah, it's really, I think it's tricky for L&D teams to like have be getting all that data, but I think it's really important, and then it helps really refine where you can have a lot of leverage. So yeah.
It's so I'm getting all these ideas talking to you, and one of the big ones is like how AI impacts L&D, and in a weird way, it may not be about more auto-generated slides, more SCORM packages, but it's kind of like back to basics and connecting the humans. And it's like the future of L&D may look like, hey, let's gather around the campfire and like learn from one another, and like that aspect of the human connection, the collective intelligence, whatever we want to call that. It's really it's not just going to be more of the same that we've been doing, but it's going to be totally different because that same is now automated, and it's coming back to the humanness.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. I think you're right. And I think that human to human connection is like, so it's so important, but you can get a lot more out of it too, is if everybody involved is really ready for that interaction. Because it would suck if, I don't know, you fly everybody together and then, okay, that could have been an email. Like we could have just read through something or done a self-paced thing and gotten the exact same thing. Because like that's terrible. But if they've done the prep, then you could have like a very like just super impactful experience with a small group of people. But maybe that requires folks to um, like do some self-paced stuff, like old school, like maybe not scoring packages, but like old school. Okay, I need to learn about this thing because I want to be able to go and not look like an idiot when I'm talking to people. Or and I'm big on like practice and feedback, and this is like the sports part of me is um, I think it's undervalued, and AI I think could be a great place for practice and feedback. And maybe it's not as good as like practicing with real humans, but you can practice a lot with. You might have these opportunities to practice in ways that you just never had before. It's not about the content, but it's like, I don't know, me having giving feedback or dealing with a difficult conversation or writing code and like having somebody give me input, like pair programming or whatever, but it's the AI jumping in and giving me something that maybe it's not as good as a human, or maybe it will be, but it's getting me to a point there where when I am meeting with a human, I'm like, I'm going to get the most out of that experience. Like all the value that I've gotten all the value I could have from the AI and self-paced stuff, but now like I'm ready to have like just a top-notch experience face to face or synchronously. So yeah, I'm excited about that. And I think it's not, I don't see a lot of it. A lot of it is like this content stuff, which I think is,
Yeah.
it's not a good path. Yeah.
Yeah, and just a little plug for we mentioned Technocon a few
Yeah.
times. So it's a community for people that are in L&D in mostly technology companies. Andrew is on the board, so am I, and we've been kind of running that for a few years now. Every month we have great speakers. So next week we actually have a speaker that's going to talk about designing experiences.
Oh,
Like
cool.
how do you what happens when you kind of bring a group of people together and like do offsites to those meetings. So very much that human to human
Nice.
interaction. So I wanted to kind of do a
Yeah.
quick plug for that. So we'll be hosting her, Jenny.
Nice.
Um,
Nice.
but I just wanted to, I always like to ask, kind of like, what's something that you're excited about? And in a way, you've been talking about what you're excited about with scale learning and
Yeah.
AI and interaction with L&D. Anything else that we didn't touch on that is on the horizon that you're excited about?
Well, I think there's this promise of learning and development, and I think I'm both excited and a little scared because I think AI is going to put learning and development in the spotlight, and so I think there's a tremendous opportunity there to like answer the call, like from those different waves that we were talking about, because there's going to be a need. And then where I'm worried, it's like if we just go back to like, I don't know, traditional learning and development, it's all compliance or self-paced stuff, and there's like it would be such a lost opportunity. So I think if we can, like a lot of the things that we're talking about, like practice and feedback, like these are not new things. Like the instructional design knows what works with learning, and they they've known for a long time. It's just like how can we apply the technology, in this case AI, to promote learning in ways that we know are going to be effective. And like the whole e-learning boom, when like that was a big thing, and but it didn't really we just did kind of the same old crap. It was online, and that was, I think it was a lost opportunity, and I really hope this is not the case this time around. So but I'm excited because there are, I think people are like yourselves and your teams are and a lot of folks at Technocon, like they're trying to do the right thing, and they're trying to like, okay, how do we know we're having an impact? How do we like make sure that it's actually changing what people are doing, and that's, I think that's promising. So yeah, so I'm excited about that.
Cool.
Yeah.
And final question: what would be a piece of advice you would give to your younger self?
Oh, that's a tough one, Marco. I think like I think listening to yourself and listening to where you have those like it's kind of the old really old advice about like know thyself, and being confident enough to be like, okay, yeah, that's who I am, or that's who I'm not, and then being like, okay, cool, like how do I make the most out of it? How do I like I'm this type of person, these are the things I'm really passionate about. How do I chart a path where that's going to be part of my life? And so I've done a lot of
Mm,
pivots, and that's a lot of learning about yourself, and I'm excited about the path I'm on now, even though it's not going to be necessarily an easy one.
got it. Well, I hear a lot of courage. I hear a lot of being in tune with self, grounded. So yeah,
Yeah,
um, awesome. Well, thank you, Andrew.
yeah,
That was super insightful. I got a whole bunch of ideas now spinning. So I really appreciate our conversation. Great to see you.
yeah.
And yeah,
Well, thank you, Marco, and like I always love talking with you and your team as well, because like and folks at Technocon, because it spurs these things, and you have everybody's passionate about this stuff, and it gets you thinking, and that's part of why I'm part of the community, and part why I just enjoy talking with you so much.
I'm sure we're going to have more of these conversations. So yeah,
Awesome, good
awesome.
stuff.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you, Marco. Take care.
That's it for this episode of the Intelligence Amplifiers. If you like what you've heard, be sure to subscribe or follow so you don't miss out on the future episodes. And if you're interested in being a guest or have a question, check out the episode description for how to reach us. Also, don't forget to check out Plus Plus, the platform that makes collective intelligence at scale possible. Find out more at plusplus.co. Thank you for listening, and until next time, keep amplifying.